This story was shared by the same person who sent us the story of Sabino and the apparitions of Monte Pio to our email, so if you like those stories, I am 100% sure that you will love Tamara's story. Because it is a somewhat long story, I am going to divide it into 2 parts, which will be published continuously and later an omnibus version will be released. That is, the complete story will be released in a single video. Tamara, the girl who wanted to be a witch. Those of us who have known Tamara since she was a child know that she is not a kind person. On the contrary, she was always a rude, capricious and spoiled girl. In the best times of her family, her father was an engineer at a platform company that worked externally for Pemex, her mother was a teacher with a double position and, apart from that, they had a family restaurant on the side of the road. Because of this, it was a very busy place. The Ruiz family, to a certain extent, was a very comfortable family. There was money, there were comforts, but there was never much attention. Tamara spent most of her time at her grandmother's house, from the time her grandmother went to school for her until the night when she came home to have dinner and go to sleep. Tamara, from a young age, put a barrier between herself and the rest of the children. She didn't like birthday parties, nor did she like other children to visit her at home. Her only friend was her grandmother. A 60-year-old lady, very attentive and polite, Mrs. Clara took care of practically everything. She looked after her like no one else until the day of her death, and her mother remembers that when she was little she heard her talking to herself in her bedroom as if someone was with her, but there was never anyone. Tamara was also a very precocious child. She began to walk at 10 months and at 2 years old she could already have conversations. She learned to read at 4 and at 6 she was already solving basic math problems. She was the pride of her parents and, obviously, of her grandmother Clara. Mrs. Clara was known by her neighbors as Mrs. Rara, since in the morning she would close the whole house and play folk music at full volume at 12 noon. She would go out to wash the sidewalk and part of the street in front of the house. After finishing, she would spread a powder that looked like cinnamon. After this, she would sit down on her porches so that a car would pass by, the same one that would take her to pick up her granddaughter from school in the afternoons. The woman would open the windows and doors of the house and light candles. The woman was always very attentive to the neighbors. On one occasion, she even acted as a midwife for the young woman who did not have time to get to the hospital. Gratitude. The young woman even made it clear to her. Her daughter Mrs. Clara was very loved by the children. She would give them fruit candy and milk candy when she said she would get it, and also bags of flavored ice cream which she would give them as well. These children, Tamara on the other hand, did not talk much with the neighbors. She did not like the children visiting her grandmother. In a way, she felt that they were taking away her attention. Raoul, Tamara's father, worked 15 days on the platforms and rested 15 days with his family. When he was at home, he used the weekends to go out to nearby places, so that Tamara would not be locked up with her grandmother all day and so the girl could socialize a little. It was a Sunday when this hand was 13 years old that, while they were visiting some pre-Hispanic ruins, they were notified of the death of grandmother Clara. Dolores' mother's grandmother had been her brother who, when visiting his mother, found her sitting in the chair without moving. She did not suffer any pain, the doctor mentioned those nights. They returned to the house and Tamara could not until she saw her grandmother's body, despite the fact that because of her age they did not want to let her see her grandmother. She did so and only said, "Don't worry, Mama Clara," as she called her. "I've made up my mind," she said when she was in front of the body. From that day on, Tamara became more irritable. She socialized less and had no friends, and even her relationship with her parents was increasingly lost. Tamara read a lot and devoured books. She listened to music that was not the kind that girls of her age usually listen to. She dressed strangely, ate little, and watched horror movies. She was practically a normal teenager at this stage that parents call the most difficult age. One afternoon, while Tamara went out shopping, her mother, Dolores, went into her bedroom looking for a beauty accessory. There she found on her bed a wooden box that she had seen years before at her mother's house. The box had no locks, so she opened it. Inside was a letter written by Mrs. Clara and addressed to Tamara. The letter said the following. "My girl, you know very well that I love you infinitely. You know very well that everything I have done is for you and your family. You are the light of my eyes, so I ask you to take care of Toman, and since I have not been able to do so, that you bring your daddy home soon. I know that you need them and they do not realize it. I hope that you will soon achieve what you set out to do when you were a child. I am no longer with you because my time in this world has expired, but I will always be with you when you need me. Remember that there is always a star that will guide you, a bearer of light that always accompanies you. I give you my books and my records. Take care of the many since there are not many of these left. With love, Mama Clara." Accompanying the letter were 3 books, 2 in Spanish and 1 in Gaelic. For imported records, which seemed to be recorded with MP3 music, a gold bracelet and a photo of Grandma Clara. Dolores thought it was a very nice detail from her mother to her daughter. That night she even had a talk with Raoul about fixing her places at school. Raoul, for his part, thought about quitting his job as an engineer and dedicating himself to. He filled the restaurant. The two agreed to talk another day when Tamara would be present. Tamara's attitude and personality changed little by little, slowly but surely. She made two friends. They were not the best influences at school, but at least they were two friends, something that was a little comforting. The parents thought that perhaps she had already begun to get over her grandmother's death. She, along with her friends, spent many hours outside the house. One day while she was coming out of the shower, Dolores noticed that Tamara had a tattoo on her back. It was like a pentagram with fire. At school they had filed a complaint because they had found her smoking, and one night she even came in with alcohol on her breath. Suddenly she went from being a young woman with problems socializing to a girl with problems. One night, Raoul and Dolores, frightened, decided to search Tamar's bedroom for drugs or something that indicated the sudden change in their daughter. They no longer knew if they preferred the newbie Mara or the one from before. They found no drugs, but instead they found a black notebook tied up. It was a diary, and inside it there were recipes, spells and notes that she took from books or songs. There were also many drawings of figure 2 animals and women with dark aspects. On one of the pages there was a poem written that spoke of the devil. There was also a sketch of the tattoo she had made on her back. Those nights, Raoul and Dolores confronted Tamara. What they had found had scared them, and they feared that Tamara was involved in some kind of satanic sect. Months before, 2 criminals had been found sacrificing 2 black cats in an abandoned school, and they were released 3 days later. They questioned her about the diary, the drawings and the images. They also mentioned the statue, but she did not say anything. Dolores, in a fit of anger, looked for the box that Clara had given her, camera in hand, threatening to burn it with the things inside if she didn't tell the truth. But the truth wasn't what she expected, and it wasn't as serious as they thought. "I want to be a witch," that's what they want to hear because I already said it. "I want to be a witch and you're not going to stop me." A witch, daughter, witches don't exist, they're people's inventions. Painful context. Witchcraft only serves to get money from stupid people. Oh mom, you lived your whole life with one and you never realized. You were raised by one. Grandma Clara was a witch, mom, and I want to be like her. Your grandmother is already dead, respect her. Don't put her in your marijuana. Tomorrow we have an exam to determine what drugs you've taken. Raoul intervened in the conversation. That night Dolores couldn't sleep thinking about her daughter's words. The statement that her mother could be a witch had made her sweat. She knew that the neighbors called her Dona Rara, weird lady, but she didn't know why. She really thought that maybe it was because of the music she listened to. The next day Tamara wasn't there, and she had taken some clothes, some books and the box that Dona Clara had given her. Her parents didn't know where or with whom she had gone. They also didn't know if she had taken money or how she had left. A classmate told her. She had heard Tamara talking to someone in the bathroom who told her that she was going to live somewhere she could already live, and she wanted it to look like she had an aunt in that state. Apart from that information, no one knew anything else. For 7 months, the family searched for her everywhere and even paid an agent in Hidalgo to look for their daughter. It is worth mentioning that they had no family in Hidalgo. The police reported Tamara missing, but since they didn't find the body, the investigation remains open. There were no traces at bus stations. The taxis had no information either. These were the longest 7 months in the lives of Dolores and Raoul. During these months, Dolores had recurring nightmares. She dreamed that her daughter appeared to her to blame her for everything that had happened to her. She also dreamed of Clara, who told her that if she had been more observant, she would have noticed and her daughter would not have run away one afternoon after going to Mass, like on the days of the newspaper. After Tamara disappeared, Dolores returned to. In the house and at the entrance they found Tamara, wrapped in a dirty serape. She was completely naked, barefoot and with a lost look. She had cut marks on her body and dirty, tangled hair, and she was crying without being able to say a word. Immediately, Dolores hugged her daughter and brought her into the house. She quickly called Raoul at the restaurant to tell him that Tamara had returned. The happiness of both was immense. They had recovered their daughter, and now it was time to find out what had happened. They wanted to help her and they didn't care. Spend whatever it took to be able to do it this afternoon. When Tamara was able to calm down a little, Dolores helped her take a bath. It was the first bath she had taken. A long time. Tamara had sensitive skin and the hot water hurt her. Dolores passed the soap sponge over her body, and as she did, she saw the marks her daughter had. Some were random marks and others had well-defined shapes. She was tortured to imagine what they could have done to her daughter during that time. but she didn't touch the tattoo on her back that Tamara barely had, and it was clear that it had no marks that had been erased with some hot device, scraping, much less that Tamara had had laser erasing sessions. Tamara had lost weight and the clothes that were in her class were too big for her. Before she ran away, Tamara had short, black hair. Now her hair looked like it had been cut and was straight. Without a doubt she had changed. The parents took her to dinner and hoped that Tamara would calm down and tell them what had happened, but that did not happen. At night, Dolores slept on a couch in her daughter's bedroom. She wanted to take care of her sleep to prevent her from leaving again, this on the recommendation of her brother, who told her that addicts often came back to the house for food. She stole money. Until that moment, the family thought that what had happened to Tamara was a product of drugs. What a coincidence that when I told her that we were going to do a drug test, she left the house, Raul said regarding the situation. 2 days passed and Tamara barely communicated. She did nothing more than say a few words to ask for water, food, or answer a direct question. The parents' fear was now greater, since they did not stop thinking of all the possibilities and wanted answers, and the worst thing was that Tamara did not give them any. What if something else happened to her? What if she was raped? What if she was a prostitute? What if she was tortured? We have to take her to the hospital to get checked out and notify the police that we have recovered her. That was what was going through the parents' minds. On the third night, something very strange happened. Someone had started hitting her. Dolores and Raul's bedroom door, but they were loud and desperate knocks. They were even struggling against the window. It was 2 a.m. and the noise. The experts thought that someone wanted to hurt Tamara. Raul opened the door but no one was there. They ran to Tamara's room, but she was sleeping peacefully and was even covered with a blanket. Dolores and Raul went back to sleep, but they were not calm all night. The next morning they found a dead dog in the living room of the house. Strange that they did not have a dog. It seemed to be a stray and the animal had a cut on its neck. Its eyes had been taken out. That gruesome discovery confirmed it. Someone had entered the house during the night. If no one had entered, it had to have been Tamara. When Tamara woke up and they showed her the dog in the living room, they asked her if she had done it. She didn't say anything and just approached the animal and sniffed it. Dolores told her daughter what had happened the night before, the knocks they heard and that she was sleeping. Tamara sat down on an armchair in the living room and said in a serious tone, "Forgive me, but they're coming for me. I didn't know what I got myself into. Grandma Clara warned me, but I thought it was just something silly. In my opinion, it was like belonging to a group like gypsies who travel together and survive in communes. I'm really sorry, I didn't know that everything my Grandma Clara told me was true. Now they want me, but who? What are you talking about? Who's looking for you? Do they want money? Tell us more for sure. I'm going to fix everything, just give me a chance. What's wrong? Who wants to hurt you, Tamara?" Then she asked them to put on a record that her grandmother had left them. Before disappearing, she had left a record she was listening to inside the modular. She also asked them to close the windows and doors and to open the Bible to Luke 11 verse 14. Only then could she tell them everything that had happened. The parents did what their daughter had asked them to do and Tamara began. "Since I was little, I always had the ability to assimilate things more quickly, for example, white lies. What you told me, I understood them perfectly, the words with double meanings, the sexual insinuations, that you made them to my mother, all this in front of me, disguised as children's stories. I understood them and I didn't care. A voice told me that everything was normal, only if I washed myself as part of our being as people. That's why, when one afternoon I heard my grandmother pray to a demon, I knew that what she did was not normal. I knew deep down that this was not something from our world. I could sometimes hear the voice that my grandmother spoke. The first few times it scared me, but then I got used to it. Grandma was a witch, she didn't lie to them. When I confessed it to her, she made me promise not to tell them as long as she was alive. In exchange for my silence, she would teach me how to be a witch. One afternoon, while I was doing my homework, Grandma wanted to teach me how to knit a tablecloth. I told her I had a lot of homework and she told me not to worry, that the homework would take care of itself. She pricked her finger with a needle and with her blood-stained finger she touched my notebook. We went down to knit and when we came back the homework was already done. Dolores and Raul listened attentively to Tamara's story. They didn't know what to believe or not to believe, but at this point seeing their daughter talk so much and without fear was a relief for them. One night, while I was sleeping, Tamara continued, "Grandma came in through the bedroom window, woke me up, and told me that she had forgotten her Spanish notebook at home. I thought it had been a dream, but the other day at her house she asked me, 'How was school?' I can already imagine what it would be like if your mother had said it. If the teacher had told her not to bring your Spanish notebook. I just said to her, 'Thank you, Mom Clara, Clara, I entered high school. Grandma Alberti told many of the boys. She told me to be careful of them because men only serve to give birth to children and problems, except, of course, for your uncle and your father. They are good men. If I spoke to someone at school arriving at Grandma's house, she told me to be careful with that girl, with that boy, that those parents were bad or that their parents were corrupt or that they were addicts. I know that the days because she overprotected me. That's why I never had friends until after her death. Since I was little, Grandma read me stories from books that she kept very well. No matter how much I looked for them, I never found them. They were stories of women with powers who lived free in the woods, who spoke with animals and that nobody hurt them. They were like superheroes to me. My classmates grew up wanting to be like Sailor Moon. I, on the other hand, grew up wanting to be like Karen Spain's daughter. Apart from reading me her stories, she told me what they did when they met, and she also told me that there were witches who were meaner than others. One day I told her that I wanted to be like her, that I wanted to be a witch, and she told me no, that it wasn't a life for me, that great things awaited me, a successful life, a beautiful family, and that witches couldn't have all that. I asked her how she was able to have children and a family if she was a witch. She answered that she made a pact where, in exchange for being able to fulfill her dream of being a mother, she would give candy to the children. I didn't understand what she meant, but I insisted that I wanted to be a witch. She only told me to think about it very carefully, and if I decided to do it, there would be no turning back. Grandma knew that she was going to die, and she told me when I said goodbye to her to go on a trip. That's why when she told me, I didn't cry. I knew that it was something that had to happen. Tamara's parents listened to the story in disbelief, but they didn't interrupt. They didn't know if they were scared or really curious. So she continued. Over time, I became obsessed with the subject. I read books that my grandmother left me, and I understood that they were books of protection. I looked for more books about witches and spells and watched movies. I also followed spell instructions that I read in the books. I got a tattoo of Lucifer even though I didn't know why my attitude was getting darker and darker, so that no one would approach me. Already during the test, I met Claudia Dialysis. She, dark, is going to have books about satanic sex and witchcraft, so I approached her. For a while we hung out together. I always played with her and did invocations of demons, but nothing ever happened, at least nothing that I would have noticed. I always felt that something was protecting me. After several months of studying and practically living in the middle of the witch issue, I achieved my first spell. I asked Dad to come back home, and the next day there was a fire on a platform. Dad was evacuated and given a long rest. What nobody told me was that all that magic came with consequences. In this case, the consequence was the death of the workers. Daily, for minor causes, food disappeared, and if I wanted, I could look in other people's notebooks or write in the one made. That's how I found out that teacher Sonia has a relationship with the father of a classmate one night, and I know that his wife discovered it by reading out loud the messages that her husband sent to the teacher. A few weeks later, the teacher was fired the week she disappeared, and I had decided to become a witch, so I offered blood to achieve it. Sorry Mom, I'm from Buqueto, Porto. Dolores had had an abortion. Spontaneous. In fact, she didn't know she was pregnant, and she was 8 weeks pregnant. One night she felt a very strong pain and went to the bathroom. She discovered blood. Or the doctor the next day, and they told her she had had an abortion. Raul was at work and never found out anything. Lamar had been sleeping at his grandmother's house those days because, according to her, he wanted to learn to cook. Dolores thought that no one else knew about the abortion except the doctor who treated her and her, so when she heard her daughter say that she had induced the abortion, she did nothing but cry, but still no one interrupted her. For some reason they wanted to hear how it all ended.